The evolutionary takeoff from year 2060 to year 2100. As the final decades of the 21st century unfolded, humanity faced a crisis unparalleled in its history. Environmental collapse has taken the center stage as the most immediate threat to our survival. By year 2060, humanity had passed all limits of the ecological planetary systems. By 2075, in the peak of summer, temperatures in major cities such as London and Paris were used to reach over 45 degrees. In some of the more southerly parts of Europe, temperatures of over 55 degrees were common. By the end of the century, carbon dioxide levels have reached almost 700 parts per million. 2.5 times pre-industrial levels. This has resulted in a global average temperature increase of 5 degrees, with the polar regions rising as high as 15 degrees. This period effectively marked the end of traditional agriculture for many countries. And has seen the establishment of whole new farming systems based on carefully controlled indoor environments. By year 2080, most of the Amazon has been converted in savanna and wasteland, causing vast mass extinctions of flora and fauna. Almost all indigenous communities vanished. Carbon dioxide emissions from the 19th through the 21st century lowered the pH level of the oceans. This increased the acidity of seawater, drastically reducing the availability of calcium carbonate that many creatures needed to build shells and skeletons. Entire regions became devoid of life, unable to support plankton, mollusks and shellfish. Food chains collapsed, with all large fishes gone extinct. By year 2080, the Australian Great Barrier Reef was declared dead. In many parts of the world, the limits for human adaptation have been exceeded. The population was in rapid decline, copying in negative the boom of the 20th century. Humans were dying and animals too, and while the ecosystem destruction continued relentlessly, our civilization seemed having failed its biggest test. By year 2100, the world was unrecognizable compared to the beginning of the century. Changes in the political, economical, social, technological, and environmental sectors have hit so swiftly that mankind was shocked about what was happening, with masses having psychotic reactions. In the second half of the century, the world finally entered into a real unnegotiable environmental protection mode, with vast mobilization of green technology and geoengineering. In terms of scale and effort, this required an unprecedented degree of government intervention, in ways that would be politically impossible in the past. As resistance to these actions quickly evaporated in a life-or-death situation, humanity entered into a survival mode from year 2060 onward. The cosmic evolutionary model. As the world plunged in turmoil, scientific advances represented our only hope to to create a new sustainable way of living on planet Earth. The meaning of our existence attracted much more attention than it did in the past, and, with it, the research for the origin of life and our place in the universe. In year 2060, a theory first proposed by Richard Dawkins almost 1 century earlier has been confirmed, with reach and meaning far greater than originally conceived. We found that the mechanisms that made possible the evolution of genes apply to the evolution of matter, and its laws as well. 3.5 billion years ago, before life developed on Earth, from a primeval soup of simple organic molecules under the influence of energy, such as light from the sun, combined into larger, more complex molecules. At some point, a particularly remarkable molecule was formed, the replicator. The replicator wasn't the most complex organic molecule on Earth, but it had the extraordinary property of being able to create copies of itself. By combining its components with the same components present in the surroundings and recreating a structure similar to its own. Relatively simple molecules able to make copies of themselves have been artificially created via molecular engineering since the 2020s. These molecules can be spontaneously generated given enough time, and in order to trigger an evolutionary process, they only had to arise once. The replicator is a mold or template. It consists of a chain of simpler molecules that work as building blocks. The small building blocks must be abundantly available in the soup surrounding the replicator. Each building block has an affinity for its own kind. If a building block ends up next to a part of the replicator for which it has an affinity, it tends to stick there. The building blocks that attach themselves in this way are automatically arranged in a sequence that mimics that of the replicator itself. They join up, forming a stable chain, just as the original replicator. This process continues as a progressive stacking up, layer upon layer. This is how crystals are formed. At a certain point, the chain split apart, forming 2 separate replicators, each of which can go on making further copies. A more efficient way to replicate and avoid a growing mass that can clog the environment is based on the affinity, not for its own kind, but reciprocally, for one particular other kind. In this way, the replicator would act as a template, not for an identical copy, but for a kind of negative, which would in return remake an exact copy of the original. At that point, a new kind of stability came into the world based on positive and negative copies, giving birth to the inception of sexual reproduction. As soon as the replicator was born, it must have spread its copies rapidly until the building blocks molecules became a scarce resource. We therefore arrived to a large population of positive and negative replicators, and to an important property of any copying process: it is not perfect. Mistakes sooner or later happen. Random copying errors can give rise to improvements, and it is essential for evolution that errors are made. As miscopying were made and propagated, the primeval soup became filled by a population consisting in several varieties of replicating molecules, all descended from the same ancestor. Some varieties were more numerous than others, and some more stable than others, or more efficient in replicating. These types would become more numerous, not only as a direct logical consequence of their longevity, but also because they had longer time available for making copies of themselves. An evolutionary trend towards greater longevity and fertility in the population of molecules rose out of chaos. The next important aspect to consider is competition, which is one of the pillars of evolution. The primeval soup was not capable of supporting an infinite number of replicating molecules. When the replicators became numerous, building blocks must have become a scarce and precious resource. Different varieties or strains of replicators must have competed for those resources. Varieties that are less effective in capturing the required resources must become less numerous because of competition, until all their lines go extinct. Different varieties were struggling in the sense that any miscopying that resulted in a new higher level of stability, or a new way of reducing the stability of rivals, was automatically preserved and multiplied. Some of them may even have discovered how to chemically break up molecules of rival varieties and to use the building blocks released for making their own copies. These proto-carnivores simultaneously obtained food and removed competing rivals. Other replicators perhaps discovered how to protect themselves, either chemically or by building a physical wall of proteins around themselves. This may have been how the first living cells appeared. Replicators began, not merely to exist, but to construct for themselves containers, vehicles for their continued existence, survival machines. Replicators without survival machines could then compete, and in time disappeared. The first survival machines probably consisted of nothing more than a protective coat. But making a living got steadily harder, as new rivals arose with better and more effective protections. Survival machines got bigger and more elaborate. The process was cumulative and progressive. Is there any end to the gradual improvement of the techniques used by the replicators to ensure their own continuation in the world? There would be plenty of time for improvement. What weird engines of self-preservation would the millennia bring forth? 4,000 million years on, what was to be the fate of the ancient replicators? They did not die out, they are masters of the survival arts. But do not look for them floating loose in the sea. Now they swarm in huge colonies, safe inside gigantic lumbering robots. Sealed off from the outside world, communicating with it by tortuous, indirect routes, manipulating it by remote control. They are in you. They created us, body and mind, and their preservation was the ultimate rationale for our existence. They have come a long way, those replicators. They go by the name of genes, and organisms are their survival machines. On planet Earth, the most effective survival machine that the replicators managed to create was an intelligent mammal called human. Intelligence has the great ability to adapt better to changing conditions, up to the point that it can change the environmental conditions, and potentially it is able to survive the destruction of the planet where genes were originated. what an effective survival machine is: a technological intelligent organism, driven by survival instinct, as we are. But intelligence has also the ability to understand things, and, after billions of years of evolution, the intelligent organism has discovered the genes inside itself. This great milestone came in 1953, when Crick and Weston discovered DNA. From the gene's point of view, nothing changed for 3.5 billion years, until they have been discovered by their own survival machine. And, with it, came the ability to modify the genes in order to suit the machine needs. Through intelligence, the replicator reached a major milestone. Not only it was able to survive for billions of years, but, through technology, it developed the ability to go beyond casual random errors of replication. In order to adapt better to the environment, it gained the ability to design those changes, to pursue a goal. By the hand of intelligence, the replicator lost control of its survival machine. From this moment on, the dynamic is turned upside down. The organism was able to take control of the replicator inside itself, in order to improve the survival machine capabilities, and not to preserve the replicator anymore. At this point, the organism started driving the evolution by design. Evolution by design is immensely more powerful and faster than random changes naturally selected. This new era is also defined by the moment when the organism reaches potential immortality, making theoretically unnecessary replication. Ironically, after the organism became intelligent and, as soon the intelligent organism developed technology, it gained the ability to control the genes inside itself. But it also invented artificial intelligence, and, with it, the organism risked losing control too. A new paradigm emerged in an ever more accelerated progression. Artificial sentient beings represented a new step for evolution. They made genes and their survival machines obsolete. This was the potential end of the line for our replicator. We discovered that the evolution of life has a similar path in all planets. The timing is different, but always, as soon the technological step is made, intelligence either takes control of its own evolution, or perishes in the process. This mechanism is not limited to the genesis of life, it also applies to the genesis of matter in more general terms. For its newly discovered generality, the theory proposed by Richard Dawkins has been expanded and renamed the cosmic evolutionary model, and it became the mainstream ideology. By year 2070, there was no doubt about the fact that mankind was evolving in a new way, taking control of its own evolution, without waiting for the old lengthy natural selection process to take place. Earth was suffering tremendously from the pressure of our civilization, driven by an unstoppable impulse toward growth. It became obvious that evolution is the fundamental dynamic force in the universe. Evolution leads to intelligence, and intelligence can accelerate evolution, in a feedback loop. The final outcome of this process and the purpose of everything were not yet fully understood, but the pattern was clear. The mainstream opinion was divided into the following possible explanation in relation to the final purpose of intelligent life. Evolution is the main driver of the universe. matter evolves in life, and life in conscious intelligence, eventually reaching the ability to transcend biology. In this view, the universe has a purpose, it is meaning-driven. A different view is that there is an architect of nature who has engineered everything for reasons inaccessible to the human intellect. The reason why a superior being has created the laws of nature and waited few billion years for life to evolve into intelligent beings is not meant to be known by mankind. This view is creator-driven. The third alternative was that there is no purpose, no creator, no intelligent design, no destiny, and no particular reason why everything exists. Life could represent the normal evolution of matter under certain conditions, or an improbable and even unique occurrence. In any case, it has no meaning. In this view, the universe has no meaning, and it doesn't obey to the Creator's will. It is just part of a process that has no purpose, it is process-driven. Historically, the majority of humanity opted for the second alternative. We didn't seek if there is an ultimate purpose of mankind existence as a civilization. For classical religions, the center of attention was the individual. It is the individual that has a sort of purpose in the afterlife rather than in life. A civilization is seen only as a multitude of individuals. In time, the classic approach showed more and more its limitations. Lifespan was continually pushed forward, leading to the belief that sooner or later life would be extended indefinitely. The old logic simply didn't add up anymore. It was therefore necessary to have a new model that could take into account the importance and purpose of humanity in life, and not in death. For this reason, the first alternative became the mainstream choice, gradually replacing classic religions. As far as the third option is concerned, humanity found it far less inspiring, and it never encountered the liking and the heart of people. Creation unlocked. Major breakthrough in the comprehension of the genesis of matter, enabled by new powerful instruments, and the immense thinking power of artificial intelligence, finally explained the hard problem of creation, and we finally figured out what happened before the Big Bang. We understood that the universe is the way it is, not by chance, not because it is the only one right for us in an infinite number of universes, and not because it has been engineered by a superior being. The characteristics of the universe, its laws, and fundamental constants, evolved through a succession of birth and death of a great number of universes. In every cycle, matter and its laws refined more and more, driven by a fundamental principle of nature that has been named the stability principle. The realization that matter went through an evolutionary process implied a chain of events that, if tracked backwards, leads to a primordial basic state, the simplest state possible for matter and energy to exist. This basic state does not correspond to absolute emptiness, it is not nothing. Nothing, as such, never existed, and it will never exist. Empty space is not totally empty. At an enormously small scale, called quantum scale, reality has probabilistic and non-deterministic properties. The fabric of space is not a quiet uniform continuous of nothing. Everything fluctuates wildly without apparent rules, chaotically, randomly, and it is only at macro level that things settle and average out their behavior, giving the impression that we live in a deterministic world governed by laws that force matter and energy to behave in a uniform and predictable way. We discovered since long time that, at the quantum scale, there is a frantic bubbling of particles called virtual particles that spontaneously and temporarily appear and disappear instantly. This phenomenon has been called quantum vacuum fluctuation, and it is associated to an energy called vacuum energy. Vacuum energy is the underlying background energy that exists in space throughout the entire universe. In 1948, the Dutch physicists Hendrik Casimir and Dirk Polder proved the existence of these virtual particles. But how is this possible? Einstein found in the early 20th century that mass bends space, and that the force of gravity is the result of the deformation of space around massive objects. However, this phenomenon can be seen from different points of view, in the sense that mass bends space, or similarly, bent space generates mass. The fabric of space at micro level is not a flat, static and uniform continuum. It vibrates, producing tiny waves acting like positive and negative ripples. This fluctuation is associated with the vacuum energy, and it is better called vacuum vibration. Vacuum energy is like the wind that generates sea waves, with the sea representing the fabric of space. Locally, space is distorted and stretched by vacuum vibrations, with the consequent effect of creating matter at the crest of the waves, where space bending is higher. Chunks of matter generated in this way have been called entities. Entities are not particles. Their shape and characteristics are random. However, matter generated by the vacuum vibration is only temporary. This is an unstable changing environment, populated by random temporary appearances. The understanding of how the actual universe can arise from such environment was crucial. In year 2063, artificial intelligence proved that, in order to stabilize entities in forms that exist for more than an instant and arrive to the universe we know today, a parallel universe was necessary. Similarly to many other things in nature, the universe has a symmetric companion, a parallel universe, also called anti-universe. As the universe contains space and matter, the anti-universe contains hyperspace and antimatter. The universe and its symmetric companion are confined into two separated three-dimensional spaces, creating a boundary. At a very small scale, this boundary fades out, becoming permeable. Below this limit we enter in a scale where interaction between the two parallel universes is possible, and it is called permeability scale. Because the quantum vibration occurs at a scale smaller than the permeability scale, waves generated by the quantum vibration can propagate across space and hyperspace. In this way, matter and antimatter can entangle, reaching equilibrium. As matter and antimatter grow, they balance each other, creating a tie, and this tie is stable. These stable entities came into existence simultaneously in both universes, at the expense of vacuum energy. The more stable matter is generated by random overlaps, the less the vacuum vibration amplitude becomes, restricting its ability to generate more matter. This effect limits the maximum quantity of matter in the universe. Entities generated in this way had random properties due to the quantum characteristic of the primordial state. The primordial quantum state was a place with no laws, no rules. Everything could happen, provided that the total amount of energy in the universe remained zero. Matter generated in this way was not uniform, and had the most disparate characteristics. This made some entities more stable than others. By being more stable, they could exist longer in a certain form, becoming more numerous. Once more and more stable entities filled space, they started to interact and combine with each other, forming more complex structures. This meant that they were less prone to be destroyed or modified by casual encounters with other entities. In this way, complex multi-entities started to develop. Various kind of complex multi-entities with similarities, called species, started to emerge. Through stability and survivability, an evolutionary mechanism developed. The stability principle has been the main driver of creation since then. Creation is a process and not a single event, like the Big Bang. Once entities of a certain species started to grow in number, they had more chances of survival. This sort of primordial natural selection worked through billions of years, limiting the number of species that survived until today. We now know them as quarks. As matter evolved, the laws of physics evolved with it, as they are an integral part of matter. As matter goes through an evolutionary process driven by the tendency to increase stability, less stable matter and less stable laws disappeared over time. Once more and more matter behaved in the same way, sharing the same laws, a more familiar universe started to rise out of chaos. This evolutionary process has taken an unimaginable time to reach the point it is now. Given enough time, laws of physics became common through the entire primordial universe. The rate of change has slowed down with time because it is much slower and harder for changes to take effect through a larger population of matter with common laws. Einstein's equivalence principle, stating that the laws of nature are the same everywhere in the universe, is a simplification of a more complex reality. The laws of nature are now very uniform throughout the multi-universe, but they are still changing very slowly, and they have been different in the past. The more we go back in time, the more different they were, and higher was the rate of change. Most of the evolution occurred before the Big Bang, and therefore not detectable. Evolution through stability and competition is a logic unavoidable characteristic of reality, given an initial state of random competing elements. The same process led to the evolution of genes, starting from one replicating molecule. The realization that the same type of process was at the basis of both the origin of matter and life was extremely important for the understanding of the true nature of reality. Order and organized complexity emerged naturally and unavoidably from chaos, given sufficient time. By year 2064, we could reconstruct the genesis and evolution of the universe as follows. In the primordial universe, called proto-universe, mass was evenly distributed at macro scale, and not governed by the current dynamic of expansion and contraction. In time, areas with higher density have developed randomly, and ever larger conglomerates of matter came together, creating the first protoplanets. protoplanets grew in size, but they couldn't ignite nuclear reactions creating stars because such process did not evolve yet. Initially mass accumulated reaching gravitational collapse into black holes, and once matter is confined in a black hole, evolution is halted. This could have been the end of the journey for matter and the universe, but at a certain point, somewhere in the proto-universe, a new process occurred. A primordial nuclear reaction created enough energy to balance the gravitational collapse, bringing new stability to the universe, and the first star was born. This was a necessary evolutionary step for matter. Nuclear fusion enabled the formation of complex atoms, chemical elements, and molecules. Nuclear reactions proliferated while all old matter remained confined in black holes. At a certain point the universe lightened up with stars and started to look familiar, but it was only an apparent similarity. The configuration of the universe and its dynamic was different from the current situation. This was a static universe with distributed mass that went the way of contraction driven by increasing gravitational pull. Planets and stars started to conglomerate due to gravitational force until all mass became concentrated on various few points, causing gigantic gravitational collapses. The concentration of vast amount of mass at universal level had the effect to equalize all differences in laws and type of matter that existed through vast areas. The equivalent mass of billions of galaxies was compressed into a small volume, stretching space so much that the permeability scale became macroscopic, causing the universe and anti-universe to enter in contact. This caused a massive collision of matter and antimatter, finally generating the Big Bang. Not only one, but various of them, each one generating a separate expanding universe. The multi-universe was born. The dynamic of the universe we observe today started with the proto-universe collapse. The multi-universe. We have seen how the universe is created out of vacuum energy, through the vacuum vibration and quantum fluctuation. Matter is the result of a sort of coagulation of the quantum fluctuation, also called quantum foam, in stable entities that evolved into matter, as we know it today. There is a large number of universes in different phases of evolution, and, like bubbles, they come into existence and disappear following the described process. Each of them generate and evolve their own laws of nature and their own type of matter, often similar because they are all originated from the proto-universe, and by the evolutionary process, driven everywhere by the tendency to reach an ever higher degree of stability. The number of universes is not limited and varies over time, but it is not infinite. There is a limit to the quantity of stable matter that can be generated until the background quantum fluctuation loses enough strength to create more stable matter. New universes are generated because old universes decay back into the original quantum state as they expand. This limit is the real fundamental constant of the universe, regulating how much stable energy and matter can exist in any given time. It is a limiting factor. If this factor is zero, it would mean absolute absence of matter, no universes of any kind. Nothing. On the opposite, if this factor is infinite, it would generate an infinite quantity of matter, filling all space available, a gigantic infinite black hole. Universes interact with each other through their gravitational influence, pulling each other apart and leaving new empty space to be filled with newly born universes. A new model of the universe emerged. Creation should then be identified with the Big Bang. There is no beginning of time and space. The Big Bang did happen, but it was not the moment of creation. It was only a moment of transformation. Creation, as the beginning of everything, doesn't exist. There is no moment in time that separates nothing from something that could be identified as creation. The main driver of the universe is evolution. The principle of conservation of energy has never and will never be violated. The net energy of the universe is zero, and it will remain zero. Matter tends to evolve, maximizing order, complexity, and stability. Finally, once the evolutionary process was introduced in physics, we managed to unify all laws of nature into one single principle, from which everything derived. Technological progress. From year 2060 to year 2100. By year 2060, the aging process was finally halted, and when year 2063 came, I couldn't believe that I was 100 years old. I could never imagine to get there. But the most surprising thing was my health condition. I was nowhere near what we have been used to think about a centenary person. I was feeling great, and I was not affected by any of the troubles elderly people usually had in the past, thanks to the advances in genetics, nanotechnology, and medicine. Exponential progress in all fields continued to reshape society. Some of the most important advances have occurred in education. Full immersion virtual reality allowed schools to exist as purely online institutions, with a seemingly infinite variety of classes and subjects. The absence of required physical infrastructure and reduced need to pay teachers has given, even to the poorest, access to a range of studies far beyond anything seen in the past. While schools and colleges still existed in the physical world, these were declining in number. Classical school couldn't keep up anymore with the revolution driven by the human brain augmentation. By year 2080, brain technology was mature enough to allow the improvement of our memory, making it unaffected by time. From that moment, we won't forget anything anymore. But this was only the beginning. In only 20 more years, before the end of the century, this technology reached the capacity to download memories from the brain of one person and upload them into someone else's mind. Donor and receiver had to be augmented with brain implants to enable memory transfers. An obvious development was the possibility to inspect memories of people subject to prosecution, with immense implication for the judicial system, up to a point that memory brain implants have been made mandatory and available for everybody in the developed countries. The next step was to isolate certain memories and experiences, transferring only the selected part. The possibility to play with the content of minds has been very controversial. And, notwithstanding the practical benefits, these practices have been strongly opposed by many. But in a world where humans were becoming more non-biological than biological by the day, what appeared inappropriate became normal very quickly. It became therefore possible the acquisition of experiences extracted from the mind of experts in various disciplines, making obsolete universities and classical teaching. Time was not wasted anymore to learn what others already found out in the past. From this moment, time was better used to push the boundary of the collective knowledge acquired as a civilization. This was one of the greatest revolutions ever occurred, triggering an unbelievable acceleration of the learning process. The combination of super-fast learning, with the increase of lifespan, made possible for people to have multiple careers in their life. This was also an effective answer to the problem posed by the technological unemployment that required fast requalification of people as soon as their job was made redundant by new technologies. But perhaps the most shocking implication of this technology was that memories were not destroyed anymore along with the body when someone died. They could be preserved forever. The first applications consisted in the downloading of memories from terminally ill people, and load them into the minds of their closest relatives. In this way, the loss of a human being was not total and irrecoverable anymore. Together with artificial eyes, these new abilities constituted a superhuman-like upgrade for who could afford them, making impossible for conventional people to challenge anyone that could benefit from such augmentations. Human beings were rapidly diverging in various categories, depending from the type and quantity of artificial augmentations they were equipped with. The difference between a fully natural human being and the most advanced users of the new technologies was so great that they could be considered as different species. Beside artificial improvement of human performances, this period saw the explosion of robotic technology equipped with artificial intelligence. With the continuing trend of mechanization, the bulk of manufacturing and physical labor-intensive jobs have been taken over by machines. By year 2100, fully autonomous, intelligent robots with human-like capabilities have been operating in almost every environment. Humanity was made redundant while robots took over our jobs. The entire food production chain, from agriculture to processing and distribution, has been mechanized. The same occurred for the manufacturing, construction, and transportation industries. With so many traditional jobs made obsolete, it was no longer possible for them to be the source of income. A leaving allowance has been introduced for everyone, enabled by the tremendous increase in mechanized productivity. It was simply no longer necessary for everyone to work. While mankind was being freed from the mere need to work in order to sustain his basic needs, a new challenge emerged. How could a jobless person be fully realized in life and in full dignity? We needed a new concept for work, a new way to add value to our lives and civilization, a new reason to be and feel useful. While for the minority of the population, getting rid of hated and disliked jobs unleashed their creativity in many fields. From art to strategic thinking, from sports and social care to philosophy and meditation, Many others lacked the intellectual capability or the motivation to exploit their potential. Larger and larger portions of the population lost motivation, falling in depression, alcoholism, and drug addiction. We learned another lesson about technology. Mastering technology implies to find the real meaning of our existence. For a technological civilization, it is not enough to give meaning to people's life only by reproducing and making a living through work, whatever the job may be. A technological civilization is forced to a deeper thinking. The purpose of intelligent beings is not only to serve their demanding and fragile bodies. The purpose is much more than that. The realization and conceptualization of a higher purpose for life constituted a new vision and a new ground of intellectual speculation for centuries to come. Technological unemployment and full immersion virtual reality transformed our society and our cities, eliminating the need of daily commuting to the city centers. Almost everyone worked or carried out other activities from home. Traveling declined to a fraction it was at the beginning of the century. The immense changes driven by technology continued revolutionizing politics and economy. Gradually various countries merged in larger and larger confederations. By year 2060, Europe, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Africa, and the United States merged into the Western Confederation, with a single currency. All Spanish-speaking South American states also merged. By year 2070, Middle Eastern, African, and Asian countries created 3 confederations, while Russia joined the West Confederation. By year 2080, all nations have congregated into 3 major confederations, and by the end of the century the world was unified under one single global currency and one single global confederation. With conventional jobs, currencies, and countries disappearing. With guaranteed leaving allowance being introduced, the classic economic capitalistic model was not suitable anymore. A new economy was born, based on a distributed model fully automated. We entered in the so-called auto economy era. All parameters regulating the auto economy were continuously assessed by artificial intelligence, which included also the proposal of new regulation and policies. All these changes had the effect to decentralize our cities, with commuting no longer part of our life, and intensive agriculture being urbanized in vertical farms. In 2 centuries our lifestyle has been revolutionized more than in the previous 12,000 years. From hunting and gathering to the full automation of everything needed to support us. Before the end of the century, we also saw the start of the picotechnology era. Picotechnology is able to operate at the molecular scale. In this way, it was possible to create molecular structures at will. The 3D printers acquired the ability to reproduce any object made of any possible material, not only polymers. It was possible to reproduce organic material as well, directly at home, leading to the end of shopping, as a practice to procure goods. Further away from Earth, by year 2060, a permanent community lived on the Moon. Small hydroponic farms provided a continuous supply of food and water to the colonists, while minerals have been mined and processed, supplying most of the basic needs for the colony. All of this produce the critical mass needed for a thriving, self-sustained human presence on the Moon. Advances in genetic engineering allowed biological humans to be fully adapted to the gravity of the Moon. This achievement may seem not hugely prominent compared with all other advances, but on the contrary, it was of fundamental importance and significance for humanity. From this moment on, humanity could survive an extinction-level event wiping out all life on the planet, such as a meteorite impact. Space tourism also boomed, with many thousands of people arriving on the Moon each year for guided tours. By year 2069, thousands of tourists congregated at the Apollo 11 landing site. To celebrate the first centenary of that event, the first landing site was declared World Heritage by UNESCO. By the end of the century, also Mars had a permanent colony dedicated to study the viability of the Mars terraformation project. On the outer reach of the solar system, manned missions arrived as far as Europa, finally discovering the first evidence of extraterrestrial life. In the sea under the planet-wide ice cap, we finally found bacteria and primitive multicellular life. This extraordinary discovery proved that life is not a unique phenomenon in the universe. Having unlocked creation, with the rise of artificial intelligence to sentient conscious beings, with mankind gaining the ability to govern its own evolution by design, having almost beaten death, and with the doors of space colonization being opened, humanity realized that we have reached an evolutionary jump, a fundamental discontinuity with respect to the natural selection process of the past. With the new century, humanity had to take off in order to survive. We reached the non-return speed for evolution.